Switch gears now in the next, 15 minutes and talk about that big story that we've been discussing over the last few weeks. I'm talking about the money that was allegedly stolen from the home of the former sanitation minister, Cecilia Dapaah. The investigations are moving along. This week we've seen and heard about the action taken by the OSP. We're learning a bit more about the work that the police have done too, because they've gone to court this week with a fresh, amended charge sheet, which still states that the amount, $1 million, is the property of the former sanitation minister. Now, I want to come to the studio now on that as we wrap up. Mr. Fusini, I believe you've been following this also very closely. This week, we learned her bank account has been frozen. OSP is doing that. Also, that additional monies were found in the house. When they searched it, we've seen the statement from the AG's office, the advice. We've seen the police amended charge sheet, which, by the way, maintains that the money is property. Where do you stand in all this as this progresses with the investigations happening?
Where do I stand in terms of what?
Well, we see the OSP work that is happening. We've seen the police work, and the big question still remains. The police is still consistent that the money belongs to her. The AG's advice says, in her initial statement on the 1st of July, and then followed up with a fourth one, which she actually wrote down, she said, the money, $800,000, is not mine, it belongs to my brother. We've seen the special prosecutor's own document before the court, the processes they filed, in which they also referenced that same statement, also that she gave to the police saying it was $800,000. But the police have gone to court with an amended charge. Still says
the facts of the matter are clear, and I've seen some graphics from Joy FM.
Yeah.
And you put the total amount of money involved in this case at 12.4 or so million.
Yeah, if you put it all together, yes.
All together. And that's what I stand by. What Joy FM is saying, that from all the sources, whether the theft of the 1 million and the 300,000 euro and the some amount of CDs from his house or her house, or the retrieval of the $550,000 and some CDs from her house, or the freezing of her accounts with two banks, Prudential and Societe Generale Bank, the total amount comes to 12.4 million. And I think 12.4 million is so huge an amount to stand in the name of a public officer, and particularly a minister of state.
But there's the point about standing the name is where I was pointing to. There's controversy over that, part of the ownership of the amount.
Part of the ownership of the 1 million.
Yeah.
But the accounts, Prudential Bank accounts, and the SGSSB accounts are in the name of the former minister. Or you know of contrary evidence to that?
Well, if you read the court documents that the special prosecutor has filed,
yes,
it says on it in writing to them that, of course, that. But in that, I need to clarify that the amounts is the value, the total value of transactions that the OSP assessed over a period. So that offers clarity. The total value assessed.
This is an ongoing and unfolding story.
Investigations, yeah.
Investigations that we are all following. I see some systemic failure because the Anti-Money Laundering Act, Act 1044, establishes the Financial Intelligence Center, and there are accountable institutions and national authorities listed in that act. There is a requirement for reporting suspicious transactions in that act. There is a limit, an amount of money, a threshold that an individual can put in her personal or his or her personal account. And that if an individual walks into a bank and puts monies into that account or his account more and above the threshold provided by the Financial Intelligence Center, that should trigger a red flag and a report of a suspicious transaction. So all this while that the minister was depositing monies in her account, did the accountable institutions include the banks and financial institutions? Did they inform the Financial Intelligence Center?
And maybe it didn't exceed the threshold. I mean, we don't know that yet. It's still an investigation. So we don't know that yet.
So there is a requirement on reporting on activities of politically exposed persons, particularly politically exposed persons. Mind you, the anti-money laundering law is supposed to deal with process of illegal or unlawful activity, process of crime. That customers or banks are supposed under the law and under the Financial Action Task Force rules and recommendations, and particularly Recommendation 40, to carry out customer due diligence, CDD, on their customers. They have KYC, know your customer. So Evans, if you have an account with a bank, the bank must know all the jobs, your employment history, and who your employers are. And so that any time money comes into your account, they can trace it. Do they?
But on this matter, isn't the focus more on what was found in their home?
No,
because
you must trace it. You must look at the procedure.
It's what was not in the bank, but rather what was home. Isn't that what this is?
What was in the bank? So are the banks
not what was in the bank? This specific matter.
What I'm saying is that in fighting anti-money laundering, the Financial Intelligence Center is enjoined to carry out bank vulnerabilities or real estate vulnerabilities and recommend actions, because there are many ways that people can hide proceeds of crime. I'm saying that for the theft at a home, it was on happenstance.
Yeah, but that's the focus on this.
No, it was because even that one, what happened? It was because the house helps were found in the room of the minister that drew their attention to the fact that something could be happening in their absence or without their knowledge. That led them to look at how much was at home, that they knew they had kept, and how much had been stolen. And so that was the indication to the minister that something was happening in her.
Happy with the investigations done so far?
For us as Ghanaians, that was the trigger point to begin to look at the activities of the minister. And that is why the OSP took up the matter, to evaluate the minister and see whether the resources that she has can be equated to her lawful income, whether by inheritance, by salary, by gift, or whatever. And that's what is happening.
I mean, Richard, on the same subject, I know it's been the party is taking collateral damage, right, significantly.
Yeah.
Because it's playing out within the context of all these economic challenges that everybody's facing, and then one of your own that seem to have a lot of money at home. Yeah. We haven't heard from the party as a corporate entity. So how is the party taking all this?
Well, thank you, Evans. I think the party at the appropriate time will speak on the matter. Except that, right now, the way I look at it, everything is fluid. There isn't any conclusive document before us to examine. That is not questionable. The issue is under investigation by, I think the special prosecutor is working on it. I think the police is working on it.
AG2 is interested.
AG is interested and they are working. That demonstrates the seriousness that is attached to the matter, which justifiably so, it should be, because it's a very concerning issue. But what I have always said is to say, and I think is a position that we should all hold, especially as a position of law, that we cannot convict people subject to just public opinion. The courts must examine the evidence. And so the question I ask is that what's the evidence that we're assessing, and which basis people are mischaracterizing her as having been corrupt and denting her image in many ways. I mean, because if you just listen to everything that is out there, you would come to some summary conclusion that she's done something wrong just by merely having money in her room, which money may be her own money, we don't know. Which money, the popular position is that it's not her money, it's somehow money she's corrupted herself to gain. And so in the midst of all that confusion, I think that we should go back to base and say, what is the position of law? How do we determine somebody's guilt in our country consistent with our constitution and laws? And it is subject to the pronouncement of a duly constituted law court to say that having examined the evidence before us, this is the verdict to say that you have corrupted yourself or this money does not belong to you. We have not had the benefit of that. Even the reports or the investigations that are ongoing, none of these institutions have given us a report. So for me, Evans, what we are discussing now or being discussed is speculation and people's excitement, because of course the issue is of interest. People's excitement picking information from sources that cannot be verified. In fact, my caution always is that please, let's proceed cautiously and not go ahead of ourselves to assume that she has done anything wrong. Because Honorable Cecilia Dapaah is one who has lived a full life.
She's innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly, and that's the position. So until we get the reports to come in and suggest to us one way or the other that having examined the evidence, she's done something that is untoward, then we all can go and then have a committed conversation about why she did that. And then the residual benefit will be that what laws can we evolve to check that behavior subsequently going into the future. I just learned about some communication, part of it has been served to your media house in respect of some pronouncements about monies in a bank account, that the special prosecutor in his processes in court didn't specify those amounts. And so therefore people perhaps are picking information from sources that, if you ask me, I would say perhaps do not have the truth to be able to communicate. And as a media house, you have a duty to inform the public. The only caution I would say in realizing what communication has come out from Honorable Cecilia Dapaah's lawyers, saying that all the numbers that are out there, all the account numbers, amounts that have been related to accounts have not been disclosed by the special prosecutor, in which case everything out there may be deemed untrue or be deemed false. So I think that on the basis of that, we should all proceed with caution. Justifiably, we all have interest in this matter, but let's exercise restraint, allow the institutions to do their work. When the report comes, I think, Evans, you have occasion on your many platforms to have us interrogate and see then conclusively what actually happened and whether or not those monies were earned legitimately, and if not, what the sanctions are.
And Martin, just a couple of minutes to wrap up. Take one of that and tell me, you've seen the investigations happening. We still see the police standing by their earlier position that it's her property. You've seen the work done by the OSP. As far as the process so far to ensure accountability, happy with everything else that you've seen from the police, AG, and OSP?
Yeah, Evans. Well, I'm happy with the OSP, but for the AG, I have comments. But before I continue, let's make a correction. In law, it's not always the case that a person is innocent until proven guilty. No, there are exceptions. There is what we call the reverse burden, and that is what applies in Madame Dapaah's case in respect of the cash. So corruption or corruption-related offenses is on one side, but that apart, in the Constitution, under Article 286, Clause 4, if we find you with property, a public officer, and it cannot be attributed to your income, inheritance, loan, then it's illegal wealth. That's unexplained wealth. So the burden is on Madame Dapaah to explain. So the public has a legitimate interest in saying, well, the way she's not explaining, then it's possible she can't explain. So please, let's note it is not always the case that you are innocent until proven guilty. There's an exception. We call it the reverse burden. You are guilty until you explain. So if Madame Dapaah chooses to keep quiet for all this while, well, that's her problem. It feeds into the perception that she can't possibly explain. Please, so don't blame the public. That is also law. To every rule, there's an exception. Then point number 2, the Attorney General, hasn't done well by not going into the antecedents of the case. We've pointed it out on various platforms that, look, there was a case involving this matter last year. It went to a certain court. There were even 2 courts. It first went to a circuit court. Then they said the person who was put before the court was not the right person. I mean, the person couldn't be brought to that court. Under the Juvenile Justice Act, we are not to give details. So I'm trying to navigate carefully. So I don't want to give details of the names of that person, etc. But the main thing is I went to a circuit court. They said, no, that's not the right court. They took it to juvenile court. Madame Dapaah was cross-examined there. She was crying and crying about this money. And Attorney General is saying he doesn't know. Attorney General's officers were informed. Then Madame Dapaah went to AG to petition against the investigator. She reported the same investigator to the Minister of Interior. Harassed the investigator. So I'm surprised that Attorney General is insisting that they didn't know that there was a case in court. There were 2 cases in court last year.
Thank you very much, Richard. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, and I would have loved to give a quick bite at this to Dr. Tui Champang. But, Doc, definitely this is a running story, and I'm pretty sure down the line, as the investigations progress, we'll get you back on. But that's it for Newsfile this morning. I was brought to Bank of Africa, MTN, Ashasi University, Robert & Sons Optical Services, Duraplast, DBS Industries, My Way, Cherry Tree Properties, Syntex Tanks, Flamingo Paints, and thank you very much to all my guests for joining us, and especially to you for staying throughout. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.